My daughter walked out on her autistic son 11 years ago, and I raised him by myself. At 16, he created a $3.2 million app, then she returned with a lawyer demanding his money. I froze. Our attorney warned we could lose. But my grandson softly said, "Just let her speak." What would you do if the person who shattered your family, who abandoned your child, suddenly reappeared after 11 years to claim their millions? That's what happened to me. My own daughter, with a lawyer, stood on my doorstep, demanding everything my autistic grandson had painstakingly built. I was in pure terror, ready to lose everything. But then he, with a quiet strength that defied his age, leaned over and whispered, "Just let her talk." My name is Vivian, and I'm 68 years old. This is my story. It all started 11 years ago. Rachel, my daughter, had dropped her 5-year-old autistic son, Ethan, at my door, promising she'd be back by Sunday. She never was. Just gone. Forever. Everyone said Ethan would never succeed. Too different, they'd say. Too difficult. They were so wrong. By the time he was 16, my Ethan had built a software company worth a staggering $3.2 million. The news caught wind of his story, and 2 weeks later, she was back. Rachel. Standing there with a slick lawyer and a stack of papers, all claiming she'd been involved the whole time. Custody papers. Fake financial records. Visit logs that never happened. All lies. But they looked real. Our lawyer reviewed them, his face grim. "Without proof these are forged," he told me, "we might just lose everything." I felt a cold dread wash over me. I panicked. But Ethan? He didn't. Not a flicker. He just leaned over and whispered, "Let her talk." I stared at him. We were about to lose everything, and he wanted her to keep spinning her web of lies? But he just sat there, utterly calm, watching, and I had no idea what he was about to do. I can still see it so clearly. A cold Friday in November 2010. Rachel stood at my front door, Ethan beside her, clutching a single, flimsy backpack. "Just for the weekend, Mom," she'd chirped, a fake smile plastered on her face. I need a break, please." Ethan, only 5, stood there, fixated on the porch floor, rocking back and forth, heel to toe. His tiny hands were clamped over his ears, even though there was no noise. "Not yet." Before I could even ask, "Rachel, what's?" she was already turning away. "I'll call you Sunday," she called out, already half running toward her car. She didn't hug Ethan. Didn't kiss him goodbye. Just left. I watched her taillights shrink and disappear down the street, leaving a void. Ethan kept rocking. For 35 years, I'd been an elementary school teacher. I'd had a few autistic students in my mainstream classes over the decades, always with the support of aides and specialists handling what I thought were the hard parts. But standing there with my grandson, my heart aching, I realized I knew almost nothing about actually living with autism. "Hey, Ethan," I said softly, my voice barely a whisper. "Want to come inside?" He didn't look at me. Didn't move. Just rocked. I picked up his backpack. It was light. Too light. My stomach clenched. For a whole weekend, it should have been heavier. I opened the door wider, waited. After a long, silent minute, Ethan walked past me into the house, his small hands still clamped over his ears. The refrigerator hummed. He flinched. The heater clicked on. He pressed his hands even tighter against his head. I closed the door, trying to be as quiet as possible, but it still felt like a gunshot. He was already in the living room, crouched in the corner, seeking refuge behind the bookshelf. "Are you hungry?" I asked, my voice still gentle. "Nothing. Just silence." "Thirsty?" He just rocked faster. I walked to the kitchen, poured water into a yellow plastic cup, one I kept for his rare, short visits, maybe twice a year. I brought the cup to him, setting it on the floor an arm's length away. He stopped rocking, looked at the cup, then went back to rocking. That first night was worse. A nightmare. I'd made chicken nuggets and fries for dinner, because Rachel had once, vaguely, mentioned that's what he ate. Ethan took one look at the plate and turned away. I tried pasta. "No." "A sandwich?" He just pushed it across the table. "What do you want to eat?" I pleaded, my voice strained. He hummed a low, guttural sound in his throat and stared at the wall. I gave him crackers. He ate 3. Bedtime was an absolute disaster. I tried to help him brush his teeth, and he screamed. Not crying, not a whimper, but a raw, terrified scream, like I was physically hurting him. I recoiled instantly. He stopped, but his whole body was shaking. Okay, I said, my voice trembling. Okay, you can skip it tonight. I led him to the guest room, tucked the blanket around him the way I thought kids liked. He threw it off. I tried again, gently. He screamed. So I just left the blanket at the foot of the bed and backed slowly out of the room. He didn't sleep. I could hear him humming that same low, haunting sound over and over, all night long. I didn't sleep either. My heart just broke for him. Saturday morning, I called Rachel. No answer. I left a desperate message. Rachel, honey, please call me back. I need to know what Ethan eats, what his routines are. She didn't call. I called again Saturday night. Sunday morning. Sunday night. Nothing. 1 week bled into 2. My heart sank deeper with each unanswered call. I took Ethan to the pediatrician. The doctor confirmed what I already knew in my gut. He's autistic, Mrs. Cooper. Has anyone talked to you about getting him evaluated? His mother was supposed to handle that. The doctor just nodded slowly, a knowing, tired look in her eyes. Well, you're handling it now. And so I did. I enrolled him in everything: speech therapy, occupational therapy, behavioral therapy. I learned he needed the exact same breakfast every single day: scrambled eggs, toast cut corner to corner, nothing, absolutely nothing, touching on the plate. I learned the route to therapy had to be exactly the same, or he'd scream himself hoarse in the car. I learned not to touch him unless he initiated it. I got good at watching. Just watching. 2 weeks after Ethan arrived, in the quiet pre-dawn, I found him in the living room. He was on the floor with a bin of toy cars I'd bought him, lining them up in a perfect, meticulous row. But it wasn't random. He'd arranged them by color, but in a way I couldn't understand at first. I sat on the couch, mesmerized. A red car, then one that was slightly more orange. Then one more orange than the last. Then yellow green. On and on. This gradient was so subtle, so precise, I had to squint to even see the differences. He'd organized them by shade, perfectly. That's amazing, Ethan, I whispered, almost to myself. He didn't look at me, but he kept arranging. December arrived, cold and bleak. Rachel still hadn't called. My hope had withered. I decided to try a different approach with Ethan. I stopped trying to get him to look at me. Stopped pushing him to talk. Instead, I just made sure everything was the same, every single day. Same VR. Learning to work with others, to communicate. He's autistic. I burst out. Communication is harder for him, but he's trying. The special education coordinator, a woman named Miss Pierce, leaned forward. Our resource room offers a smaller setting, fewer distractions, students who understand his challenges. Students who can't keep up academically, she implied. That's not Ethan, I stated flatly. Principal Andrews deployed that familiar principal voice, the one I recognized from my own decades in classrooms, reasonable, patient, and utterly condescending. We understand you want Ethan in a mainstream classroom, but we have to consider the needs of all students. Are you telling me Ethan is disruptive? I demanded. Not disruptive, exactly. Then what's the problem? Miss Pierce opened her folder. Ethan's social skills assessment shows significant delays. His IQ testing was inconclusive. He refused to finish several sections because they were timed, and that made him anxious. His therapist documented that, she added, as if it were a nail in his coffin. Which brings us back to our point. Principal Andrews chimed in, summing up. Ethan needs support we can't provide in a regular classroom. That was it. I snapped. I opened my own thick folder and pulled out the first document. This is Ethan's reading comprehension test from last month. 97%. 7th grade level. Next document. Math assessment. 100%. 5th grade material. I kept pulling papers, stacking them deliberately in front of Principal Andrews, a mountain of undeniable proof. These are therapy notes showing his progress in speech, in emotional regulation, in sensory tolerance. He's come further in 4 years than anyone predicted. Not because he's in a special room with low expectations, but because people believed he could do more. Mrs. Brennan looked profoundly uncomfortable. It's not about expectations. Yes, it is. I insisted, my voice rising. You want him somewhere else because he makes you uncomfortable. Because he doesn't perform normal, the way you want normal to look. The room went silent. Principal Andrews cleared his throat. Mrs. Cooper, I understand you're frustrated. But under IDEA, Ethan has the right to the least restrictive environment. That means a mainstream classroom with appropriate supports. Not segregation because he's different. I probably shouldn't have used the word segregation, but I was so tired of being polite. We're not suggesting segregation, Miss Pierce said quickly, her face flushed. Just a more appropriate setting. Then provide the supports in his current classroom, I countered, leaning forward. Noise-canceling headphones for music. Extra time for transitions. A quiet space if he gets overwhelmed. That's accommodation, not removal. They looked at each other, defeated. Principal Andrews sighed. We'll draft an IEP with those accommodations, he said finally. But if Ethan continues to struggle, he won't, I stated, with a conviction I didn't actually feel. But I knew deep down that giving up on him wasn't an option. Not ever. That evening, my head still buzzing from the meeting, I spread all the school notes across the kitchen table. My hands, familiar with this work from years in classrooms, began organizing them into a 3-ring binder, color-coded tabs for medical, educational, therapy, legal. Ethan wandered in from the living room. He'd been watching his Friday show, the same episode as always. His yellow cup sat innocently on the counter where he always left it. He stood watching me silently. What are you doing? He asked, his voice clearer now, stronger. Making sure the school can't forget what you can do, I said, a small smile playing on my lips. He moved closer, his eyes scanning the papers. Can I help? I glanced at him, surprised but pleased. Sure. We worked together for an hour. I showed him how I was organizing everything. He studied my system, absorbing it instantly, then pointed to the therapy tab. These should be sorted by date, then by type. Speech separate from occupational, separate from behavioral. I looked where he was pointing. He was right. It made so much more sense. Show me, I said. He rearranged the entire section in 10 minutes, creating a system I never would have conceived, logical, clean, perfect. I watched him, his hands moving fast, utterly focused. He understood organization on a level I could only dream of. Pattern, structure, order. It came to him as naturally as breathing came to other people. That's really good, Ethan, I said, genuinely impressed. He just nodded when he finished, no smile, but I could tell he was pleased. The next year, when Ethan turned 10, his speech therapist suggested a tablet for communication support, something to type on when speaking felt too hard. I saved up every penny and bought him one for his birthday. He had it figured out in a day. Within a week, he downloaded a scanning app and started photographing every page of his notebooks, creating meticulous digital copies. I watched him work, methodical and focused, preserving everything he'd ever written. Why are you doing that? I asked him once. So I don't lose it, he said, without looking up from the screen. At therapy group sessions for parents, the other mothers would always ask me, during coffee time, how do you get Ethan to cooperate? What's your secret? How do you handle the meltdowns? I'd always say I don't handle him. I listened to him. One woman, Linda, whose 7-year-old son was nonverbal, shook her head, tears in her eyes. But how do you stay so patient? I thought about that for a long moment. I guess I stopped trying to make him be someone else, I finally said. I just tried to understand who he is. She looked at me like I'd said something profound, but it wasn't. It was just the only thing that worked. That year, Ethan started noticing patterns everywhere. We'd be driving, and he'd suddenly announce, the traffic light on 4th Street is mistimed. It stays red 45 seconds longer than the others. I had no idea if that was true. At the grocery store, he'd scan the receipt and point out a pricing error. The apples were marked wrong, 3 cents higher than the shelf tag. He was right. Every single time. Later that fall, at a parent-teacher conference, Principal Andrews smiled at me while explaining Ethan's progress. But his eyes stayed flat cold. In the car, Ethan said, simply, "He doesn't like me." What? No, honey. He was being nice. Ethan glanced at me, his expression blank. His face moved wrong. The smile didn't match. When people really smile, the muscles around their eyes contract. His didn't. He was pretending. I drove in stunned silence. Ethan was 10 years old, and he could read faces better than I could. By the time he turned 11 and started 5th grade, I truly thought we'd found our rhythm. Then, Mrs. Hong, his new teacher, called me at work one afternoon. "Mrs. Cooper, Ethan disrupted class today." My stomach dropped. What happened? I was teaching long division. Ethan stood up and corrected me. In front of everyone. I paused. Was he right? A beat of silence. That's not the point. That's exactly the point, Mrs. Hong. Was he right? She sighed. Yes, but... Then he started helping me, Mrs. Cooper. He embarrassed me. He needs to understand there's a time and place. He's 11. I said, exasperated. He sees a mistake, he corrects it. That's how his brain works. Another parent conference. Another stack of paperwork. This time they wanted to label him oppositional defiant. I brought 6 months of Dr. Lin's therapy notes, proving Ethan wasn't defiant. He was direct, factual. He didn't understand social hierarchies that said adults were always right, even when they were wrong. He's not being disrespectful, I explained to the school psychologist, my patience wearing thin. He's being honest. There's a difference. They agreed to drop it, barely. That night, Ethan asked me a question while we ate dinner. Why do they want me to be different? I set down my fork, my appetite gone. What do you mean? The teachers, the other kids. Everyone wants me to act like I'm not me. I didn't have a good answer. Not really. Because they're scared of people who see more than they do, I said finally. He thought about that, nodded once, and went back to eating. A few weeks later, he asked if I had his birth certificate. Why do you need that? I asked, confused. I want to see it. I found it in my file cabinet. He studied it for a long time, his brow furrowed, then asked for his school enrollment papers, his social security card, anything with his name on it. Are you okay? I asked gently. Is this about your mom? I just want to see everything, he replied. Make sure it's all there. I assumed he was processing what had happened, trying to understand why Rachel left, what his life looked like on paper. It made sense for a kid who organized the world in categories and files. I helped him scan everything into his tablet, birth records, medical history, every legal document I had. He saved them all carefully, backed them up, created folders with labels I didn't quite understand. What are you building? I asked once. A system, he said, not looking up. So nothing gets lost. I kissed the top of his head. Okay, buddy. Whatever helps. I thought he was coping with his past. I had no idea he was preparing for his future. That future started taking shape the summer Ethan turned 12. He'd been scanning documents for months by then, organizing everything into his tablet with an almost obsessive focus, a focus I'd learned never to interrupt. But in June 2017, I discovered something new. Coding. I found him one afternoon at the kitchen table, my old laptop open, staring at a screen full of text that looked like absolute gibberish to me. Lines of words, symbols, brackets, a language I didn't know. What are you doing? I asked. Learning Python, he said, not looking up. What's Python? A programming language. I'm following a tutorial. I leaned over his shoulder, squinting at instructions about variables, functions, loops. None of it made sense. Is this for school? No. I just want to learn it. I left him alone. That was the secret with Ethan. Let him follow what interested him. He spent the entire summer on that laptop. While other kids were at baseball camp or splashing in the pool, Ethan was coding. I'd bring him lunch, and he'd eat without ever looking away from the screen. His yellow cup sat beside the laptop, half full of water. He'd often forget to drink. By August, he was showing me things he'd made. Little programs that performed tasks I still didn't quite understand. This one sorts files by date, he explained. This one finds duplicates. This one checks if a file has been modified. That's really impressive, Ethan, I'd tell him, my pride swelling. He'd just nod and keep typing. In September, I used the last of my savings to buy him a better computer. A real one. Not my old hand-me-down laptop that took 5 minutes to start up. He'd earned it. The man at the electronics store asked what Ethan would use it for. Programming, Ethan stated, his voice clear. How old are you, son? The man asked, smiling. 12. The man chuckled. That's a good age to start. You'll go far. Ethan didn't respond, just waited for me to pay. At home, he set up the new computer in his room. I made him promise to still come out for meals and to sleep at reasonable hours. He agreed, but I could tell his mind was already back in that world of code I couldn't enter. One evening in October, he called me to his room. I want to show you something. I sat on the edge of his bed. He pulled up a program on his screen. What is it? I asked. Watch. He opened a simple text file, a few sentences. Then he ran his program. Numbers appeared on the screen, long strings of them. That's the document signature, he explained. Like a fingerprint. Okay, I said, not really understanding. He opened the document again, changed one word, saved it, then ran the program again. Different numbers appeared. See? The signature changed. That means the document was altered. My eyes widened. So you can tell if someone edits something? Yes. And when? And how many times? He looked at me then, actually made eye contact for a moment, his gaze intense. So things stay true. My mind flashed back to all those school meetings. All those times administrators had said one thing, then later claimed they'd said something else. All the times I'd wished I had proof. That's brilliant, Ethan. I gasped. He turned back to his screen. It's just pattern recognition. Digital instead of physical. Just pattern recognition, he'd said, as if that wasn't everything. As if that wasn't genius. The next year, when he was 13, the project expanded. I want to digitize all your binders, he announced one morning at breakfast. The school meeting notes, all of it. I looked at him over my coffee, raising an eyebrow. Ethan, that's a lot of scanning. We already did the legal stuff. I know, he replied, his gaze unwavering. But I want everything in the system. What system? The one I'm building, he said simply. So nothing gets lost or changed. I thought about it. Those binders. They held years of fights, years of relentless advocacy, years of irrefutable proof that Ethan wasn't what people assumed he was. Okay, I conceded, but you're doing the scanning. My back can't handle that many hours hunched over. We spent weeks on it. I'd pull out binders, one by one, and Ethan would scan page after page. IEP meeting notes from 2014, therapy assessments from 2012, report cards, progress notes, incident reports. Every single piece of paper that told Ethan's story. But he didn't just scan them. He did something else to each file on his computer, adding layers of information I couldn't see. What are you adding? I asked him once. Timestamps, verification codes, hash values. He paused, looking at me. Each document connects to the ones before and after it, like a chain. If someone tries to change one link, the whole chain breaks. Why would someone change them? I asked, a chill running down my spine. He looked at me, his eyes clear and direct. Why did Principal Andrews try to move me when I was 9? Fair point. A very fair point. So, this protects the truth, I said, understanding dawning. Yes. I watched him work, this incredible kid who'd been nonverbal just 7 years ago, who'd screamed at the sound of the vacuum cleaner, who couldn't look anyone in the eye. Now he was building something I could barely comprehend, something so powerful. I'm proud of you, I said, my voice thick with emotion. He nodded once, then kept scanning. Our relationship had changed by then. We didn't need a lot of words. I'd say something, he'd nod. He'd show me something on his computer, and I'd tell him it was good. We had dinner together every night, same time, same seats. His yellow cup, always to the right of his plate. It was comfortable. That's what it was. A comfortable silence with someone who understood that you didn't need to fill every quiet moment with noise. He turned 14 in November 2018. One afternoon, he asked if I'd kept anything from when he first came to live with me. Like what? I asked, bewildered. Receipts, calendars, bank statements. Anything from 2010 or 2011. I frowned, perplexed. Why would you want that? I just want to see it. I led him to the garage, to the boxes I'd never thrown away, because, as a teacher, I'm simply not a throwaway kind of person. Old tax records, utility bills, bank statements going back a decade. Calendars where I'd meticulously scrawled appointments and errands in cramped handwriting. You kept all this? He asked, a rare note of surprise in his voice. I taught elementary school, Ethan. We keep everything. He started sifting through the boxes, pulled out my 2010 calendar, opened it to November, and ran his finger down the dates. Why do you need this? I asked again, my heart beginning to pound softly. I need to know what really happened, he said, his voice quiet but firm. Not what people say happened. What actually happened? I sank onto an overturned crate. This is about your mom, isn't it? He didn't answer right away. Just kept looking at the calendar, at my handwriting marking the day Rachel brought him, the days after when I'd written, try chicken nuggets, and call Rachel, and doctor appointment. I need to know the timeline, he finally said. When things happened. What was real? My chest tightened. He was processing it. The abandonment. The long, silent years without her. The questions he'd never gotten answers to. We can skin all of it, I said, my voice thick with emotion. Whatever you need. We brought the boxes inside. We spent the next month scanning, grocery receipts, bank statements showing I'd never received a penny from Rachel, phone bills proving she'd never called. Calendars documenting our routine, our life, every ordinary day that proved she'd been utterly gone. I thought he was building a timeline of his childhood, understanding his past through documentation and proof. Why grocery receipts? I asked once, watching him skin a faded slip from 2011. They have dates, he explained. They show where we were, what we bought. They're evidence. Evidence of what? Of what happened. Of what was real. I didn't push. If he needed this to heal, I'd help him, no questions asked. He started staying up later that year. I'd go to bed at 10 and hear the rhythmic click-clack of his keyboard through the wall. At midnight, I'd get up, make him a sandwich or cut up an apple, leave it silently on his desk. Thanks, he'd murmur, without looking away from his screens. Some nights, I'd wake at 2 or 3 in the morning and see light under his door. Ethan, you need to sleep, I'd call out softly. Almost done, he'd reply. He was never almost done. One night in February, I brought him tea at 1 in the morning. His room was cold. 3 monitors now, all glowing with different screens of code, documents, and data. What are you making? I asked, my voice hushed. He paused, turned to look at me, his eyes tired but brilliant. Something that will help people know what's real and what's fake. What actually happened versus what someone claims happened. That's really important to you, I observed. Yes. Because of your mom? He thought about that for a long moment. Because people lie, he said, simply. And sometimes you need proof. I kissed the top of his head. His hair desperately needed cutting. Don't stay up all night, I said. I won't. He did anyway. I'd find him asleep at his desk some mornings, his head on his arms, monitors still glowing. I'd gently put a blanket over him, make breakfast, and an hour later, he'd wake up and come to the kitchen like nothing had happened. I was so fiercely proud of him, proud of his dedication, his intelligence, his relentless drive to create something meaningful. I just didn't understand what it was really for. I thought he was healing from the past. I didn't know he was building armor for the future. He'd ask me sometimes to test his programs. Click this button. Tell me if the colors look right, if the words make sense. I didn't understand what any of it did, but I could tell him if it looked finished. Does it work? I'd ask. Yes. Then what are you still working on? Making it better. Always better. Always more accurate. Always one more test. One more verification. One more way to prove what was real and what wasn't. I thought it was just a project, something impressive he'd put on college applications someday. I had no idea what he was truly building. What he was building turned out to be something people would pay millions for. Ethan was 15 when he finally finished it. It was spring 2020, the middle of the pandemic. The world was in lockdown, and everyone was suddenly living online. Ethan barely noticed the difference. He'd been living in his room with his computers for years already. "I want to show you something," he said one afternoon in May. I followed him to his room. 3 monitors blazed, all showing different screens. He pulled up a program with a clean, almost stark interface. Nothing fancy, just boxes, buttons, and text. "This is it," he announced. "The verification system." "What does it do?" I asked, my curiosity piqued. He clicked through screens, showing me features I only half understood. "It analyzes documents," he explained patiently. "Checks if they've been altered when they were created. If the signatures match other known samples, it catches forgeries." I watched the program run through a sample document. Numbers appeared, graphs, detailed analysis results. "So if someone fakes a document, this catches it?" I asked, stunned. "Yes. The metadata, the digital fingerprints, the patterns. It sees what people can't." "That's incredible, Ethan." He just nodded. "I'm going to sell it." "To who?" "Security companies, fraud prevention. Anyone who needs to verify documents are real." He said it so matter-of-factly, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. My 15-year-old grandson was going to sell software to companies. "Do you know how to do that?" I asked, my voice probably a little breathless. "I've been researching," he said. Of course he had. He started reaching out to companies that month, sending emails written with a professional language I helped him polish, though his direct way of writing was often clearer than most business communications I'd seen. The first sale came in June. A small security firm bought a license for $20,000. I stared at the number on the screen when Ethan showed me. $20,000? "It's less than it should be," he replied. Blank, but I could see something in his eyes. Something I couldn't quite read. "Ethan," I said quietly, my voice desperate. "What do we do?" He looked at me for 1 second, his gaze brief but piercing, then back at Rachel. "We should get a lawyer," he said. Getting a lawyer turned out to be easier than actually using one. I found Linda Reyes through a referral, a sharp family law attorney with 20 years of experience. She met with us 3 days after Rachel's ambush, coming to our house because I simply couldn't face going to an office. I brought every single binder I had, my hands shaking the entire time I carried them to the kitchen table. Years of school records, therapy notes, medical appointments, every piece of paper proving I'd raised Ethan alone. Ethan sat quietly beside me, watching, always watching. Linda spread Rachel's documents across the table, the ones Walsh had presented. She studied them for over an hour, reading every page, checking signatures, examining the stamps with a magnifying glass. Finally, she looked up. Her face told me everything before she even spoke. "These look legitimate," she said carefully, her voice grim. "Very professionally done. But they're fake." I cried, my voice cracking. "She's lying. She hasn't seen him in 11 years. "I believe you, Vivian," Linda said, a flicker of sympathy in her eyes. "But do you have concrete proof these documents are forged?" I pulled out my binders. "I have everything. Every school meeting, every doctor visit, every therapy session." Linda looked through them, nodding slowly. "This is excellent documentation. It proves you've been the primary caregiver. But, Vivian, without hard evidence that her documents are fake, a judge might rule in her favor." "Why?" I demanded, desperate. "Because she never legally terminated parental rights. There's no court record of custody transfer. Schools and doctors accepted you informally." She paused, her gaze piercing. "Did you ever file for formal guardianship?" The room went cold. My blood ran cold. "I didn't think I needed to. She abandoned him." "I know," Linda said gently but firmly. "But legally, without documentation of that abandonment, without her signing away her rights, she's still his parent on paper. Her lawyer," she explained, "would argue that an informal arrangement didn't override parental rights." I couldn't breathe. "So, she can just take him?" She's not trying to take physical custody. He's 16. Courts rarely force teenagers to move. She's after financial guardianship, control of his assets until he's 18. $3.2 million. That's what this was really about. Can we fight it? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Yes, she said. But I need you to understand. Her case looks strong. She has documentation, a compelling narrative about maintaining involvement from a distance. Unless we can prove those documents are fraudulent, we'll lose. Linda didn't soften the blow. I looked at Ethan. He sat perfectly still, hands folded on the table, face utterly blank. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Ethan, I said quietly, my heart in my throat. Do you understand what's happening? Yes. Are you scared? He thought about that for a moment. No, how could he not be scared? I was terrified. Linda explained the next steps: depositions, discovery, court dates. It would take weeks, maybe months. The whole time, Rachel's claim would hang over us, a dark cloud threatening to burst. After she left, I just sat at the kitchen table and broke down. We're going to lose you, I sobbed, tears streaming down my face. After everything, after 11 years, we're going to lose. Ethan stood up. Didn't say anything. Just walked to his room and closed the door. I wanted him to tell me it would be okay. To show some emotion, some fear, something. But he just left me there. I cried alone at that table for an hour, feeling utterly, hopelessly defeated. The deposition started 2 weeks later. Rachel went first. She sat in the conference room at her lawyer's office, perfectly composed, hair styled, makeup subtle, wearing a soft gray sweater that made her look positively maternal. I visited monthly when possible, she purred, her voice sweet as poison. Sent financial support through money orders. Called regularly to check on his progress. Why didn't you take physical custody? Walsh asked, playing his part. I felt it was better for Ethan to have stability with my mother while I dealt with personal challenges, but I never stopped being his mother. I never stopped caring. She reeled off dates, specific months she claimed to have visited. Exact dollar amounts she supposedly sent: December 2012, $300. April 2014, $500. On and on. A detailed financial record of support that never happened. I sat there listening, my nails digging deep into my palms, trying not to scream. Mrs. Cooper, Walsh asked, his voice smooth as silk. Why are you seeking custody arrangements now? Rachel looked at me, a theatrical, regretful smile on her face, her eyes filled with fake sadness. Because Ethan has significant assets that need proper management, and because he's approaching adulthood, I want to be present for this crucial transition, to guide him, to make up for lost time. I wanted to scream. I wanted to call her a liar in front of everyone, expose her cruel, calculating betrayal. But Linda had warned me, stay calm. Don't react. Let her tell her story. After Rachel finished, Linda pulled me aside. Her face was grave. Her testimony is detailed, consistent. That's very convincing to judges. It's all lies. I whispered, my voice raw. I know, Linda said, a deep sigh escaping her. But can you prove it? I couldn't. Ethan's deposition was 3 days later. Walsh grilled him about his childhood, about memories of his mother, about her involvement. Do you remember your mother visiting you? Walsh asked. I don't recall specific visits. Do you remember phone calls from her? I'd have to check my records. What about financial support? Did you know she was sending money? I don't remember receiving money from her. Walsh looked pleased, a smug smirk on his face. He thought Ethan's memory was poor, that it supported Rachel's narrative that she'd been involved. He thought Ethan, being autistic, simply didn't remember clearly. He had no idea. Linda asked Ethan questions too. Can you describe your relationship with your grandmother? She takes care of me, cooks meals, helps with school. She's always been there. Do you want to live with her? Yes. Do you want your mother to have control of your finances? No, short answers. Direct. True. But they felt so weak, so fragile, against Rachel's detailed, insidious lies. After the deposition, Linda drove us home. He did well, she said, trying to be reassuring. But, Vivian, I have to be honest. Without evidence proving Rachel's documents are forged, this is going to be incredibly difficult. How difficult? I asked, my voice barely a breath. We might lose. That night, sleep was a cruel joke. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing, picturing Ethan being taken away, Rachel controlling his money, those 2 years until he turned 18 feeling like an eternity. At 3 in the morning, I got up. I saw light under Ethan's door. I opened it quietly. He was at his computer. 3 monitors glowing like alien eyes in the dark room. Lines of code scrolled across one screen. Documents and data filled the others. Ethan, it's 3 in the morning, I whispered, my voice breaking. I know you need to sleep. Court is tomorrow. He didn't turn around. I'm almost done. Done with what? He kept typing. I moved closer, saw spreadsheets with dates, files with names. My bank statements. Calendar entries. Phone records. Ethan, I said, my voice raw with despair. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to fight this. He stopped typing. Didn't turn around. Just tell the truth tomorrow, he said quietly, his voice calm. That's all you have to do. The truth isn't enough. I cried. She has documents. She is proof. Fake proof, but proof. Tell the truth, he repeated, his tone unwavering. I wanted to shake him, to make him understand how serious this was, how utterly terrified I felt. But he just sat there, calm, focused, like losing me didn't matter. I went back to bed. I didn't sleep. Just lay there in the dark, trembling, terrified. Ethan stayed at his computer all night. I heard the keyboard clicking until dawn. I had no idea what he was doing. I just knew I was about to lose him, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. Morning came, cold and unforgiving, whether I wanted it to or not. I got up at 6, made breakfast, though neither of us could stomach a bite. Ethan emerged from his room at 7, showered, dressed in the crisp button-down shirt we'd bought for court. He looked older than 16, tired, yes, but impossibly calm. You ready? I asked, my voice thin. Yes. We drove to the courthouse in silence. My hands trembled violently on the steering wheel. Ethan stared out the window, his gaze steady. Linda met us on the steps, her expression serious. Remember, Vivian, stay calm. Let me do the talking. Ethan, answer questions directly, but don't volunteer information. Ethan just nodded. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected. Wood paneling, harsh fluorescent lights, that faint, institutional smell of old paper and floor polish. Judge Harrison sat at the bench, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and gray hair pulled back severely. Rachel sat at the front table with Walsh. She dressed carefully, in soft colors, minimal jewelry, her hair loose. She looked every inch the concerned, grieving mother. We sat at our table, Linda on one side of me, Ethan on the other. All rise, the bailiff announced. The hearing began. Walsh stood, presenting his case smoothly, effortlessly. Rachel Cooper, devoted mother, maintained consistent involvement despite personal challenges. Documentary evidence of parental rights never terminated. Financial support provided. Regular contact maintained. He laid out the documents on the evidence table, the fake custody papers, the bogus co-parenting agreements, the fabricated financial records. All lies, all so convincing. Judge Harrison reviewed them carefully, taking her time, her expression unreadable. Then she looked at Rachel. Mrs. Cooper, can you describe your involvement in Ethan's life over the past 11 years? Rachel's voice was steady, warm, oozing sincerity. I tried to stay connected as much as possible, Your Honor. I visited when I could. I sent money to help with his care. I called regularly to check on his progress. Why didn't you maintain physical custody? The judge asked. I felt it was better for Ethan to have stability with my mother while I addressed personal issues. But I never abandoned him. I never stopped being his mother. I never stopped caring. She said it with such conviction, such sincerity, that a part of me almost believed her. I wanted to scream. The judge asked more questions. Rachel answered all of them. December 2013, I visited for Ethan's birthday. April 2015, I sent $500 for therapy costs. May 2017, I called to discuss his progress in school. Lies, all lies, but detailed, consistent lies. Judge Harrison looked thoughtful. Thank you, Mrs. Cooper. Then it was Linda's turn. She presented my binders, years of school meetings, therapy records, medical appointments, every piece of evidence that I'd raised Ethan alone. But as she went through them, I could see the judge's expression. Sympathy, yes, but also doubt. Miss Reyes, Judge Harrison said, her voice betraying a hint of impatience. These records show Mrs. Cooper has been the primary caregiver, but I don't see formal guardianship documentation. No court order transferring custody. No legal termination of parental rights. My chest tightened, a vice clamping around my heart. Your Honor, Linda said carefully, desperately. Rachel Cooper abandoned Ethan when he was 5 years old. My client has documentation of that abandonment, but without Miss Rachel Cooper's signature on custody termination papers, without legal documentation, her parental rights remain intact. The judge looked at me, not unkindly, but with a weary finality. Mrs. Cooper, I understand you've done excellent work raising your grandson, but legally, without proof that his mother abandoned her parental rights, her claim has standing. The room tilted. My world spun. Rachel looked at Walsh, a subtle, triumphant smile playing on her lips. She thought she'd won. My heart was pounding so hard I couldn't breathe. I looked at Ethan beside me, desperate for something. Anything. His face was completely blank, unreadable. I leaned close, whispered, "She's lying. We have to stop her." He turned his head slightly, looked directly into my eyes, and whispered back, "Let her talk." What? Let her say everything she wants to say? I didn't understand. We were losing. And he wanted Rachel to keep talking? Judge Harrison looked at Ethan. Young man, do you wish to speak? A long, pregnant pause. Ethan sat perfectly still. Then, slowly, deliberately, he stood. Yes, Your Honor. I have evidence. My heart stopped. Evidence? What evidence? I'd given Linda everything I had. Approach, Judge Harrison commanded, her voice sharp with surprise. Ethan picked up a bag I hadn't even noticed him carrying. He walked to the witness stand, calm, steady, like he'd done this 100 times. He pulled out a laptop. May I connect this to the display, Your Honor? Judge Harrison looked utterly bewildered. What are you presenting? Verification of document authenticity and timeline evidence, he said, his voice clear, direct, just the way he always spoke. I built a system that proves whether documents are real or forged. Walsh was on his feet immediately. Your Honor, this is highly irregular. We weren't informed of this evidence. Your client presented fraudulent documents 6 weeks ago, Ethan stated, looking calmly at Walsh. I'm presenting analysis of those documents now. Judge Harrison studied Ethan, a flicker of something new in her eyes. Proceed, but this better be relevant. Ethan connected his laptop. The courtroom display lit up. He pulled up Rachel's custody documents first, the very ones Walsh had presented. They appeared on the screen, official-looking, with stamps and signatures. These documents claimed to be from 2011 through 2020, Ethan explained, his voice unwavering. But the digital metadata shows they were created 6 weeks ago, right after the news story about my software sale aired. He clicked through screens, showing creation dates, file properties, editing history, all time-stamped, all undeniably recent. Walsh objected again, furious. Metadata can be manipulated. Not in this case, Ethan said, his voice as calm as a summer breeze. The signature verification shows additional discrepancies. He pulled up my copy of his birth certificate, Rachel's signature from 2005, then ran a program that analyzed the signatures on her custody documents. Numbers, comparisons, statistical analysis flooded the screen. The pressure patterns don't match. The letter formation is inconsistent. The spacing and slant are different. These signatures were forged. Judge Harrison leaned forward, her sharp eyes fixed on Ethan. How do you know this? I built a verification system. It analyzes documents for authenticity. It's what I sold last month. You're 16, the judge stated, more to herself than to him. Yes. She blinked. Continue. Ethan pulled up a new screen, a timeline. These are my records. I've been documenting my life since I was 9 years old. He showed spreadsheets, scanned documents, photographs, all time-stamped, all verified. Mrs. Cooper claims she visited in December 2013. Here's my grandmother's calendar from that month, showing our schedule. Here are photos from that week with timestamps. Here are my therapy session notes from December 9th. Therapist confirmed, no mother present. Here's the school attendance record showing I was present every day that month. He clicked through more screens. December 2013. Rachel wasn't there. Mrs. Cooper claims she sent money orders. Here are 7 years of my grandmother's complete bank records. No deposits from Rachel Cooper. Not $1. Bank statements appeared on screen. Every transaction highlighted. Every source documented. Nothing from Rachel. Mrs. Cooper claims she called regularly. Here are phone company records from 2010 to present. 0 calls from her number after December 24, 2010. Phone records, years of them. Rachel's number, nowhere. April 2015. She claims she sent $500 for therapy. Here's the bank statement showing no such deposit. Here's my grandmother's calendar showing she paid out of pocket. Here's the receipt. Every single claim Rachel had made, Ethan systematically demolished with irrefutable proof. Walsh stood again, his face a mask of panic. Your Honor, this evidence wasn't disclosed in discovery. Because you presented fraudulent documents 6 weeks ago, Ethan said, unflustered. I built the verification system to analyze them. That's impossible. Walsh stammered. You couldn't build something like this in 6 weeks. I didn't, Ethan replied, a faint, almost imperceptible smirk touching his lips. I've been building it for 7 years. I just finished analyzing these specific documents 6 weeks ago. Judge Harrison stared at him, her eyes wide with dawning realization. You've been documenting your life for 7 years? Yes, Your Honor. Every calendar entry my grandmother made, every receipt she kept, every therapy session, every school meeting, every bank transaction, everything is time-stamped, cross-referenced, and verified. The system makes it impossible to alter retroactively. He pulled up more screens, showing the judge exactly how it worked, how each document connected to others, how the verification codes proved nothing had been changed. So when Mrs. Cooper says she visited monthly, sent money, called regularly, I can prove she didn't. Because I have proof of what actually happened. What was real? The courtroom was utterly silent. Judge Harrison looked at Rachel. Mrs. Cooper, can you explain these discrepancies? Rachel's face had gone paper white. She looked frantically at Walsh, who was now sweating. The metadata could be wrong, she stammered, her voice shaking uncontrollably. The dates might be. I did visit. I did send money. When exactly? The judge pressed. December 2013. I remember. Do you have proof, receipts, photos, anything? Rachel stammered, her composure utterly shattered. I didn't keep records. I was there. I know I was there. But you have detailed financial records of money orders sent? Judge Harrison asked, her voice like ice. Yes, those show. Rachel was falling apart, contradicting herself with every word. The confident, maternal woman from 20 minutes ago was gone, replaced by a desperate, trapped liar. Mrs. Cooper, Judge Harrison said coldly, her voice cutting through the silence. Did you or did you not falsify custody documents? No. My lawyer said. Walsh looked sick to his stomach. Judge Harrison turned to Ethan. This verification system, it's legitimate? Yes, Your Honor. I sold it last month to Anderson Security for $3.2 million. They verified its accuracy before purchase. The judge's eyebrows rose, higher than I'd ever seen them. Then she looked at the evidence again. At the timeline. At the irrefutable proof that Rachel had been gone for 11 years. I've seen enough, she said, her voice firm, final. She ruled from the bench. No recess, no deliberation. Rachel Cooper, I find your testimony not credible and your documentation fraudulent. Full custody and guardianship is awarded to Vivian Cooper. Furthermore, I'm referring this case to the district attorney for investigation of perjury and fraud. Rachel made a sound like choking. This hearing is adjourned. The gavel struck. It was over. Outside the courthouse, standing in the glorious afternoon sun, I finally understood. You knew, I said, my voice filled with awe, looking at my quiet, brilliant grandson. You've been protecting us all along. Ethan nodded once. He didn't smile, but his eyes held a depth of satisfaction I'd never seen before. 6 months later, things looked profoundly different. Ethan couldn't work in data security anymore. The non-compete clause from selling his verification system was ironclad. So, with that incredible mind of his, he started a new company, software testing and quality assurance. I'm hiring people like me, he told me over breakfast one morning, his eyes alight with purpose. Autistic people. We see patterns others miss. His very first hire was Stephen. I recognized the name immediately. Stephen had been my student 20 years ago. I'd fought the school board for him in 4th grade, just like I fought for Ethan. They'd said he'd never hold a job. Now he was Ethan's lead quality tester. Then came Marcus, then Lily, more of my former students, kids people had given up on. I visited Ethan's office one afternoon. A small, functional space. 6 desks. Everyone wearing headphones. Quiet. Focused. Stephen saw me, took off his headphones. Mrs. Cooper, he said, his voice thick with emotion, a crack forming. You told the principal I wasn't broken. Just different. He looked away for a moment. Ethan says the same thing. I couldn't speak. Couldn't articulate the swell of pride and love in my chest. I just nodded, tears pricking my eyes. As for Rachel, she got 2 years probation and 500 hours of community service at an autism resource center. 3 months into her sentence, I was dropping off donated supplies and saw her. On the floor. Reading to nonverbal children. She looked up, saw me. We both froze, a strange, heavy silence hanging between us. She looked exhausted, truly humbled, nothing like the slick, calculating woman who'd shown up with a lawyer. The center director, not knowing who I was, told me that volunteer comes in extra hours. Says she's learning what she should have learned years ago. I didn't speak to Rachel. Just watched for a moment, then left. Some things don't need words. On a Tuesday evening a few weeks later, I brought dinner to Ethan's apartment, just like I always did. His yellow cup sat on the counter, chipped, but still his favorite. We ate at his small table, in our usual quiet, comfortable rhythm. I started clearing plates. Ethan put his phone down. Vivian. I turned around, surprised. He rarely used my first name. He was looking at his hands, his brow furrowed. I know what you gave up for me. I sat back down, my heart pounding softly, waiting. Your friends stopped calling. You stopped going places. I heard you on the phone once, turning down a trip because you couldn't leave me. He paused. Ethan, you could have sent me away, I whispered, my throat tight. Like she did. School suggested it. But you didn't. You're my grandson, I managed, tears blurring my vision. I know, he said, finally looking up, his eyes holding a depth of emotion I hadn't seen before. But you chose it every day. Even when I couldn't say thank you. Silence. Just the hum of his refrigerator. It mattered, he said quietly, almost to himself. I reached across the table, put my hand near his, not quite touching, but close. You were worth every single day, I said. He nodded once, a faint, almost imperceptible smile. I know that now. We sat there a moment longer. Then I got up, finished the dishes while he opened his laptop. Same routine, same comfortable silence, but something profoundly important had been said. I kissed the top of his head on my way out. He didn't flinch. See you Tuesday, I said. Tuesday, he confirmed. I drove home through streets I'd driven 1,000 times before. Same routes, same turns. The way Ethan liked things. The way I'd learned to like things, too. My phone buzzed at a red light. A text from Ethan. Thank you. Just those 2 words. I smiled the whole way home. So, that's my story. It's been quite a journey, hasn't it? I'd love to hear what you think. If you were in my shoes, Could you ever truly forgive your own daughter for abandoning your grandson, only to reappear years later to try and steal his future? Tell me what you think in the comments below. I really want to know.